Tonight on Primetime, a fragile regional truce is under pressure after a new exchange of strikes between Iran and Israel. As Washington pushes for diplomacy, the question remains: are we moving closer or further away from a deal? Good evening. Tensions between Iran and Israel have sharply escalated following a new exchange of strikes that are threatening efforts to secure a wider regional ceasefire. US President Donald Trump has asked Israel not to retaliate and urged Iran to come to the negotiating table.
Iran launched multiple waves of missiles towards northern Israel on Sunday, marking its first direct attack on Israel since the April truce, which Tehran said was in retaliation for Israeli strikes on the outskirts of Beirut earlier that day. Israeli defense systems intercepted most of the missiles, according to the military. Explosions and air raid sirens were reported in Haifa and other areas of northern Israel, although there were no immediate reports of significant damage. The Iranian attack reportedly involved 4 missile barrages, according to the Israeli military, and targeted the Ramat David airbase in northern Israel. Iran's Revolutionary Guard warned of further attacks if Israel continues its strikes.
Despite the previous warnings of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the child-killing Zionist regime has targeted Beirut's Zahieh by crossing all red lines and increasing attacks in southern Lebanon. We had previously warned that if the crime in the suburbs of Beirut expands, we will attack targets in the occupied territories. The Zionist army must stop its attacks on southern Lebanon and the suburbs, and if it expands its attacks on that region or responds to Iran's actions, it will face more crushing and regrettable blows, and destructive attacks will begin against the regime and its supporters.
The missile barrage came after Israel carried out airstrikes on military targets in western and central Iran and launched attacks on Beirut's southern suburbs earlier in the day. The Israeli military said the Beirut strikes targeted Hezbollah-linked sites in response to cross-border fire into Israeli territory. Local media reported that 2 apartments in separate buildings were hit in Beirut's southern suburbs, which, according to Lebanese health authorities, killed at least 2 people and injured around 20 others. Other Lebanese sources said a wider wave of Israeli strikes across Lebanon killed 11 people and wounded 44.
What's your position?
US President Donald Trump had urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to retaliate against Iran, criticized the strikes on Beirut, and said Iran's missile attacks would not help ongoing negotiations. Iran has repeatedly said any agreement with Washington depends on a ceasefire holding in Lebanon. However, Sunday's Israeli strikes on Beirut have raised fresh doubts about prospects for a broader regional settlement.
Well, Iran has warned Israel against retaliation after the Revolutionary Guard said they fired a barrage of ballistic missiles at an airbase in northern Israel, which had originated raids on Lebanon on Sunday. Our correspondent Choraj Shirililo reports now from Tehran.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry warned in a statement on Monday that any military operation by Israel against Lebanon or Iran would meet Tehran's forceful and comprehensive response. The statement was issued after Iran's Revolutionary Guards, IRGC, announced late on Sunday that its aerospace force targeted an Israeli airbase by ballistic missiles in retaliation for the attacks on Lebanon. It said Israel's attacks on Lebanon was a breach of the 8th of April ceasefire deal between Iran and the US, adding that the missile attacks were carried out in compliance with Iran's inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. According to an IRGC statement, its aerospace force fired missiles at Israel's Ramat David airbase in response to the widespread military operation in southern Lebanon and the suburbs of capital Beirut. The Revolutionary Guards said that Sunday night's missile raid was a warning and that if Israel continued its strikes in Lebanon, all Israeli and US targets would be included on the force's list of attack targets. Meantime, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held separate phone calls with his counterparts from UK, Turkey, France, Qatar, Egypt, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, as well as Pakistan's army chief, whose country is mediated an extended ceasefire agreement between Tehran and Washington. The contacts were made on Sunday and early Monday, following Iran's missile attacks, which coincided the 100th day in the Israel-US war with Iran on 28th of February. Araghchi stated that Tehran had warned Israel to cease its military operation in Lebanon. On Sunday, Araghchi also met Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Raza Naqvi, during which the visiting official delivered the special letter of Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei. Sunday night's ballistic missiles attack were carried out on the eve of the 12-day war's first anniversary, which falls on coming Saturday. On 13th of June last year, Israel attacked Iran and was later joined by the US bombing of Iran's 3 major civilian nuclear sites under the UN safeguards. In the latest development, the IRGC Aerospace Force said on Monday that it launched a missile operation by targeting the strategic air bases of Nevatim and Tel Nof in response to Israel's attacks on radar sites in 3 parts of Iran. Turad Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
So just weeks after a ceasefire appeared to calm tensions, Iran and Israel are once again exchanging fire. President Trump has publicly urged restraint, warning against further retaliation while trying to keep negotiations on track. Well, joining us now is Matthew Berza, former US diplomat who is in Istanbul, Turkey for us. Ambassador, Mr. Berza, well done. Thank you very much indeed for connecting with us tonight.
Thank you.
Iran says that it acted because Israel crossed a red line in Beirut. Now, there have been suggestions in the past that what is happening in Lebanon is separate, somehow peripheral to the central conflict. But now it's firmly it's an integral part of the negotiation, isn't it?
Well, it is. And from Iran's perspective, it always has been. Think back to, I guess it was April 6th when the ceasefire went into effect. Immediately, Iran was firing missiles and drones into the Strait of Hormuz, or at least saying the Strait of Hormuz was closed because Israel was continuing its attacks in Lebanon. So from Iran's perspective, its proxies or its allies of Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're part of this war as well. And it was, in fact, Hezbollah who did chose to attack Israel, I guess on February 29th, right after the United States and Israel attacked Lebanon. So the United States would prefer that, I think, that Lebanon and Hezbollah not be part of the equation. Israel rejects that, and I think Netanyahu, realizing that Iran demands that the ceasefire can happen only if Israel stops attacking Lebanon, provides Israel exactly the pretext it seeks to continue this war as long as possible.
Now, Trump has urged Israel not to retaliate. How much influence, though, do you think Washington still has at this point over Israeli decision-making?
Well, Washington has unlimited authority over Israeli decision-making if it wishes to exercise it. Israel really cannot survive as a state without U.S. support, right? It certainly cannot conduct any war without U.S. military and financial support. And its very existence as a state, God forbid, would be called into question if the U.S. were to withdraw support. Now, of course, the U.S. is never going to withdraw its support for Israel overall. I mean, supporting Israel is a moral issue in addition to a strategic one in the U.S. But in terms of prosecuting war, I think it's a bit rich, if you will, or inappropriate that both coalition member politicians and opponents of Netanyahu are calling him a puppet of Washington, D.C. for accepting President Trump's admonition not to attack southern Lebanon when they very well know without the U.S. weaponry, Israel could not conduct any military operations or sustained military operations, even though Israel's military is one of the best in the world.
And in terms of what's happening in Tehran, Ambassador, do you think it's Iran's strategy to try and resist a deal for as long as possible? Because every time President Trump announces that a deal is close, and then it doesn't materialize, that's a big win for Tehran, right?
Oh, it sure is, Kay. It sure is. I mean, the Iranians think that time is on their side. And I think they're probably right, because they know that all they have to do to be victorious is survive. And that President Trump is facing growing domestic political pressure to end the war. The war is very unpopular in the United States, especially among his supporters, and especially the Republican Party with midterm elections coming. And also, the Iranian regime knows President Trump faces tremendous pressure from global markets and from its friends and allies, both the allies in the Gulf, who don't like being, to say the least, attacked by Iran, but also all of its strategic allies who worry about a possible catastrophic increase in oil prices that could really damage the global economy. So Trump's under pressure, and the regime in Tehran doesn't really care that its citizenry is suffering from the economic hardship, and they're just trying to survive, which for them means victory.
And do you think we're witnessing the collapse of the post-April ceasefire framework, or do you think this could still be contained diplomatically?
I think we're getting to the nitty-gritty moment when finally President Trump is saying to Prime Minister Netanyahu, we've had enough. This ceasefire is never going to be sustained, and the war is not going to end as long as you keep attacking Lebanon. I know, as President Trump, that you, Mr. Prime Minister, are doing exactly that. You want to prolong the war for your own domestic political reasons, and I don't accept that now. You've got to stop. And so now Netanyahu faces a very difficult choice, right? Does he succumb to the U.S. pressure to sustain the military support, I mean, in terms of weaponry, that Israel must have to continue this war? In which case he suffers politically at home, or does he risk all that support by bowing to his domestic political pressure? So we had to come to this moment if we were ever going to get to a sustained ceasefire at the end of the war. And now things have to be worked through, and politicians have to make very difficult political choices now.
Ambassador, Mr. Breiser, always great to get your analysis. We thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, the European Union imposes fresh sanctions on Iran over its actions in the Strait of Hormuz, adding new pressure as diplomatic efforts continue across the region. Don't go away.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. The European Union has imposed sanctions on 2 Iranian individuals and a unit of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, accusing them of threatening maritime freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said member states in Brussels approved the measures under a new sanctions regime focused on protecting freedom of navigation, adding that further action could follow if needed. Ms. Kallas made the remarks to reporters at a meeting of EU defence ministers in Cyprus. Now, the informal gathering focused on current and emerging security challenges under the Cyprus EU Council presidency.
Freedom of navigation is under heavy pressure globally, as we see most acutely in the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran effectively closed the strait, and its drones continue to threaten the maritime traffic. Ministers were clear today that Iran's actions are unacceptable. In response, EU member states in Brussels today approved sanctions against the Iranian individuals and entities involved in disrupting the transit through the Strait of Hormuz. And this is the first time EU has applied its new freedom of navigation sanctions regime, and where necessary will apply it again.
The European Union has taken a new step against Iran, targeting members of the Revolutionary Guard's Naval Command over restrictions on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Brussels says, of course, Tehran's actions have undermined freedom of navigation and disrupted one of the world's most important trade routes. The move marks the first use of the EU's new sanctions regime, designed specifically to address threats to maritime traffic in the region. The decision comes at a delicate moment, with diplomatic efforts underway between Washington and Tehran and concerns growing over the security of the global energy supplies. Joining me now to discuss this is Diogo Castro Silva, political analyst, joining us from Sao Paulo in Brazil. Welcome to the programme. Thank you very much, Mr. De Silva, for joining us. Why has the EU then, let's just start with the basics, why has the EU chosen this moment to impose sanctions on Iran's naval structures?
Hi there. Well, it might be linked to what is happening in terms of the negotiations of a potential peace deal between the US and Iran. A lot of people that are looking closely at those negotiations say that basically the US has made significant concessions, but there are doubts inside of Iran whether they should extract even more concessions given their increasing leverage with the Strait of Hormuz. And there is also unclear different factions inside of Iran, some of them more bellicose, and some of them have doubts if the US is really sincere in those concessions, or it will strike again, because we have to recall that the United States twice struck Iran during peace negotiations. So there is a lot of mistrust, and I wonder if the timing is not connected to this and to put an extra pressure in Iran for a deal to be achieved.
Yeah, interesting. Brussels says this is about freedom of navigation, of course. Do you think the EU is signalling a more assertive role in Middle East security affairs?
I wouldn't say as much. We have to see the context of the freedom of navigation of the Strait in the context of what will happen post-conflict. We have to say that the conflict, once it's done, the sanctions regime is over, because Iran will not allow any boats to go through of countries that are sanctioning Iran. That for me seems to be pretty clear. So the sanctions regime will be over once the conflict ceases. Now, what we are also discussing, and I think what the EU is signaling, is what happens after the conflict's done in terms of the freedom of navigation, and what has been kind of floated as potential arrangements between Iran and Oman in terms of disguising a tolling in terms of environmental inspections or fees or some kind of other kind of fees. So we have this, for me, is a signaling more for the post-conflict than for now. For now is pressure, but I think it's a signaling for what will be the arrangement post-conflict.
Now, President Trump has spoken to Mr. Netanyahu. He clearly, there's a sense in which Washington feels that a deal could be quite close, doesn't want anything to upset the chance of that happening. Do you think there's any sense in which these sanctions could complicate the diplomacy between Iran and the United States?
No, I wouldn't say that. Like I said, I think these sanctions might have even been coordinated with Washington to put an extra pressure. Obviously, freedom of navigation is crucial for the European Union. The European Union is a huge trading bloc that depends on several critical waterways. But I think the timing is really to put pressure in Iran to accept a deal, because in the view of many observers, Iran has won significant concessions already. So it's just a matter of really going for this extra mile. Who is opposed to any deal and who is opposed to any settlement is, of course, Israel. And that is the element that can really disturb the reach of a final agreement.
And just on that point, just put to you a question that I put to our previous guest. Do you think there's any sense in which it's part of Tehran's strategy to resist agreeing a deal for as long as possible, knowing that the longer this goes on, the more political damage this does to President Trump?
Well, they are doing that since the beginning. But there is a point that this strategy has diminished returns. So the big danger of Iran is overplaying its hand. The pressure that it made since the beginning was exactly based on your premises of your question. Now, but there is a point where you overplay it. And I fear that they are reaching close to that point. And the leadership in Iran will have to make a decision soon. Otherwise, they will really overplay their hand. And then the net benefit of this whole war will start to decrease.
Yeah, and just on that then, what is the negative consequence of overplaying the hand? Is it economic capitulation, or is it something more sort of geopolitical?
Well, it's both. It's economic consequences at home, because Iran has depends, and the regime long-term survival depends on the sanctions being waived and released, and of new cash coming in. So they also face a decision on their long-term survival. Their short-term survival has been helped by the war. That is a given. Now, their long-term survival and their long-term strategic position depends on a settlement that is beneficial to them, and not burning all the bridges around the region and around the globe, even with parties that are quietly supportive of Iran, for example, China. So there is a moment where they have to take a decision, otherwise they will start burning those bridges and those benefits that they will have, and those are critical for the long-term regime survival.
And finally, Mr. Silva, you said at the top that you thought that it's possible that these sanctions could be done in concert with Washington, that it's part of a coordinated move. Nevertheless, do you think that Europe wants to send a message about the strength of Europe to Tehran?
Also, and playing an autonomous part. And like I said, they want to signal that whatever the post-conflict situation, the freedom of navigation for European countries is a crucial element. So in my view, they are signaling what is their position for any for anything that happens post-conflict, and to signal to Iran that that controlling the Strait of Hormuz or imposing navigation restrictions after the conflict will not be accepted by European countries. And again, one must see that in the context that probably the European countries will waiver the pre-conflict sanctions like other countries, like Japan, like Korea, like all the countries. Iran will have a much more beneficial sanctions situation, but then the other part of the bargain is that it cannot impose navigation restrictions in the Strait of Hormuz. I think is on those lines that probably any post-conflict settlement and situation will occur.
Mr. Silva, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business stories shaping the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenging.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note. To Fierce. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, Port Ainu.
A warm welcome back to Primetime. Now, Katie Wilson is here bringing us the very latest business news stories. Katie, what have you got on your agenda tonight?
The impact of the war in the Middle East on the US economy, on Asian stock markets and the airline industry, but also the Saudi Arabian economy showing resilience amid the uncertainty. So, as I mentioned, Asian markets tumbled as investors pulled back from the AI-driven tech rally, whilst escalating tensions in the Middle East pushed oil prices sharply higher. concerns over interest rates, geopolitics, and a major SpaceX listing are adding to market concerns.
Asian stocks plunged on Monday morning as investors hit the brakes on the red-hot AI rally. South Korea's tech-heavy Kospi index took the heaviest beating. It was down around 6% by late morning after volatile trade had earlier triggered a 20-minute halt. Chip giant Samsung matched the overall decline. Meanwhile, Japan's Nikkei index was down around 4% by the same time. That follows a similar drop for the Nasdaq on Wall Street at the end of last week. One analyst told Reuters that doubts have crept in over tech earnings, partly following weaker-than-expected numbers from U.S. chip maker Broadcom. Last week's hotter-than-expected U.S. jobs data have also all but wiped out hopes for further rate cuts by the Federal Reserve this year. Then there's Iran. Tensions in the Middle East have flared again, following Israel's strikes on Lebanon and Iran's retaliatory strikes on Israel. International benchmark Brent crude was up around 3% on Monday morning, once again heading towards the $100 per barrel mark. That's despite weakened action by the OPEC Plus oil exporters group to reassure markets with a further boost to output. Later this week, all eyes turn to the potentially record-breaking SpaceX share listing. Elon Musk's rocket firm is set to start trading on Friday, and is expected to debut with a valuation of around $1.75 trillion. With so much money going to that, and more possible mega listings such as OpenAI, some brokers have expressed concern about the impact on other assets.
Well, it's not much better news for Wall Street, which suffered its biggest setback in more than 2 months, as the stronger-than-expected US jobs report rattled hopes for interest rate cuts. Chipmakers led the declines, with investors also questioning whether AI spending is delivering the returns many had expected.
Wall Street's 9-week winning streak came to an abrupt halt on Friday, with the Dow dropping about 1.33%, the S&P 500 sliding more than 2.6%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq tumbling nearly 4.2%, its largest one-day percentage loss in more than a year. Selling was concentrated among chip stocks and other technology favorites that have surged in recent weeks as the Nasdaq and S&P 500 rose repeatedly to fresh highs. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index erased more than $1 trillion in stock market value on Friday, suffering its largest one-day percentage plunge since March of 2020. Eric Lynch, managing director and co-portfolio manager of Suncoast Equity Management, said tech stocks tanked due to rate hike and AI spending concerns.
The first factor is the blowout jobs report this morning. That has taken the chances of another Fed cut off the table for 2026. That hits long duration, most exciting speculative stocks the most. But also there's been grumblings about AI, just some concerns about whether or not the token usage is really translating to great returns. And you've seen some consternation kind of bubbling up.
Among individual movers, AI chip maker NVIDIA, the largest company by market value, lost more than 6%, while Intel, Micron, AMD, and Broadcom all slid between about 8% and 13.5%. Shares of Lululemon Athletica slumped about 8.5% after the athletic apparel maker cut its annual profit forecast and projected second quarter earnings well below Wall Street estimates. And a more than 4% drop in Bitcoin hit cryptocurrency firms, with shares of Coinbase and Strategy each tumbling about 7%.
Well, let's get more on that jobs report, which has reinforced signs of resilience in the US economy, whilst complicating the outlook for interest rates. The latest figures are likely to give the Federal Reserve room to keep borrowing costs higher for longer as it grapples with inflation pressures.
The U.S. economy posted a third straight month of strong job gains in May, giving the Federal Reserve more room to keep interest rates unchanged amid rising inflation. The Labor Department's closely watched non-farm payrolls report, released Friday, showed the economy added 172,000 jobs last month, well above economists' estimates. March and April were also revised higher, with the economy adding 93,000 more jobs in those months than previously estimated. and the unemployment rate remained at 4.3% for a third straight month. The data comes as new Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Warsh is about to oversee his first policy meeting later this month. While Warsh stepped into the role amid expectations he would guide the Fed towards lower rates, pressure may now be building in the opposite direction, as a solid jobs market will likely prompt the Fed to focus more on rising inflation. As a result, investors after the report's release boosted bets the Fed will raise rates before the end of the year. Still, economists said the bar remains high for monetary policy tightening and that fiscal stimulus, in the form of tax and tariff refunds, has cushioned the impact of the surge in oil prices due to the Iran war. Corporate profits have also increased since the second quarter of 2025, allowing businesses to refrain from large-scale layoffs. Economists, however, warned of risks to the labor market if the war in Iran persists.
AI chip giant Nvidia has unveiled a string of new partnerships in South Korea as it looks to strengthen its supply chain and expand its reach in the fast-growing AI market. The deals span everything from advanced memory chips to data centers. Let's take a look.
Jensen Huang's visit to South Korea paid off with a series of deals announced on Monday. The Nvidia CEO said agreements were reached with South Korean giants like SK Hynix and Naver.
We're seeing great demand. The business is booming around the world for more AI factories. And so that's the reason why we're entering this partnership, so that we could extend our partnership, increase the scale of our partnership quite substantially.
Huang's high-profile trip to the country began on Friday. It's seen him throw a baseball pitch, dine with top corporate leaders and meet a well-known gamer. It comes with the US firm aiming to secure crucial memory chips to power its AI ambitions and draw new customers. SK Group said its SK Hynix and SK Telecom arms had agreed deals with Nvidia. Memory chip maker SK Hynix signed a multi-year technology partnership. It said this commits it to developing advanced types of memory for global AI data centers. SK Hynix and Nvidia said the deal would help supply keep pace with Nvidia's plans, which now includes robotics, personal computers and AI supercomputers.
SK Hynix will continue to be Nvidia's largest memory partner. And this is a partnership and a friendship that has gone back a long time. I'm very proud of the contribution Nvidia has made to SK Hynix.
Monday's update comes as memory chip makers struggle to keep up with demand. Huang said the agreement was for more than 2 years with the option to keep extending. Nvidia said internet giant Naver and Doosan would also use its tech to help build AI data centers. Huang also said Nvidia is partnering with LG Group on electronics, mechanical systems and AI for humanoid robots. And he revealed Nvidia would deepen its partnership with Hyundai Motor Group across a range of AI initiatives. Huang also planned to meet Samsung semiconductor business head later on Monday. Nvidia and its partners, including SK Telecom and Doosan Group, didn't reveal the value of the deals.
The global airline industry has sharply cut its profit outlook for next year, warning that conflict in the Middle East is driving up fuel costs, disrupting flight routes and weighing on demand. Airlines are now facing growing pressure as geopolitical tensions expose the industry's vulnerability to external shocks.
The global airline industry nearly halved its 2026 profit forecast on Sunday, citing conflict in the Middle East that has driven up fuel costs, disrupted key air corridors, and exposed the fragility of a sector operating on thin margins. The International Air Transport Association represents more than 370 airlines, accounting for about 85% of global air traffic. It said in its annual report that it now expects the industry to post a combined net profit of $23 billion in 2026. That's down from $45 billion in 2025. The downgrade underscores airlines' exposure to geopolitical shocks and fuel volatility. Airlines are also expected to cut unprofitable routes to protect margins, while fares, which have surged since the start of the Iran war, are unlikely to fall soon, according to IATA. The Middle East conflict has forced airlines to reroute flights around closed or restricted airspace. It added hours to some journeys, increasing fuel burn and straining already tight capacity. At the same time, oil prices have surged on fears of supply disruption. Gulf airlines such as Emirates, Qatar Airways and Etihad Airways face the greatest operational uncertainty after a near-complete shutdown of regional airspace at the start of the conflict. IATA CEO Willie Walsh said most regions should remain profitable, though at lower levels, while Middle East airlines are likely to slip into the red due to the conflict and weaker demand.
And finally, whilst conflict has weighed on parts of the Gulf economy, Saudi Arabia is showing signs of resilience. From busy restaurants to expanding technology, businesses are finding opportunities amid uncertainty. Let's take a look at how the kingdom is weathering the regional storm.
When food tech entrepreneur Sarah Amini wanted to see where Gulf businesses were still spending despite the Iran war, she flew to Riyadh. There, she found restaurants full and companies still talking expansion.
When I come to Saudi Arabia, I feel like it's business as usual.
That's in contrast to other Gulf economies in Iran's firing line, where the hospitality sector has taken a hit. Amini is based in Dubai and manages an AI platform that helps food distribution companies digitize operations and cut costs.
What's really distinguishing the kingdom from the rest of the other Gulf countries is that the dependency on tourism or expats is not as high. So the desire and people's willingness to go out, dine out is still there.
But it may not be business as usual across the Saudi economy. The International Monetary Fund said that, despite its resilience, growth would be notably lower this year. So far, Saudi Arabia has been helped by a strong domestic consumer base and a rerouting of crude oil and logistics to ports on the Red Sea to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. This week, a survey showed Saudi Arabia's non-oil private sector expanded at the fastest pace in 3 months in May. Mohammed Makni is an economic analyst.
If we compare our economy in Saudi Arabia with other countries in the Gulf region, I think there is a big difference between them. So that's mean still we have alternative plans and we have strong actually activities in our economy and also attractive visitors from outside.
Changes brought on by the war combine with a shift in Saudi Arabia's strategy to diversify away from oil. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Grand Vision 2030 project aims to build up new industries. The new 2026 to 2030 strategy, released in April, omits or drastically scales back some of Vision 30's previously planned large-scale projects and focuses on sectors expected to drive returns like tourism, AI and logistics. Some local firms are seeing gains from the pivot. Abdul Rahman Al-Namla is co-founder of tech platform Sirdab.
A lot of new entrants that are coming to the Saudi market. They're able to test out how the Saudi market is doing through people like us who offer flexible warehousing and flexible transportation for them to use however they need.
Tourist resorts on the Red Sea are also showing higher demand, mostly from Saudi residents seeking easier or safer breaks. Data showed hotel occupancy nationwide averaged just over 66% in January to March. In contrast, Moody's Analytics projected hotel occupancy in Dubai would drop to roughly 10% in the second quarter, compared with 80% in February.
That's today's business news. Back to you, Guy.
Fascinating stuff as always, Katie. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at Zelensky's call for direct talks with Putin as long-range strikes intensify on both sides. Don't go away. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome out, you're watching Primetime. Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Pyongyang for a two-day state visit where he is set to hold summit talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Now, the visit is Xi's first visit to North Korea in 7 years. Our correspondent Manor Makdoum reports now from Beijing.
President Xi received a grand welcome upon his arrival in the North Korean capital on Monday. Kim Jong-un and First Lady Ri Sol-ju greeted President Xi at the airport, with a grand ceremony later held at the Kim Il-sung Square, featuring a cavalry escort, a 21-gun salute, and crowds waving flowers and flags. The visit comes as China and North Korea seek to deepen strategic communication and strengthen bilateral ties. Ahead of his arrival, Xi published a commentary in North Korea's state newspaper, pledging unwavering friendship and vowing to deepen cooperation across multiple areas, including the military. No specific agenda has been disclosed, but experts say that the meeting is expected to have significant ramifications for bilateral ties and beyond, as both sides seek to fully restore their traditional alliance in the face of separate confrontations with the United States. North Korea is expected to press for economic concessions and potentially seek Beijing's tacit recognition of its nuclear status. Days before Xi's visit, North Korea unveiled a new facility for producing nuclear bomb ingredients, and Kim has vowed to expand the country's nuclear forces. China, meanwhile, is likely to seek Pyongyang's alignment on security matters and push back against what Beijing views as Japan's increasingly assertive defense posture. Analysts say Xi's decision to make Pyongyang his first overseas destination of 2026 shows the level of significance Beijing attaches to shoring up this relationship at a time when North Korea's deepening ties with Russia have complicated China's traditional role as Pyongyang's primary patron. The talks are being closely watched for signals on denuclearization, regional security, and the future direction of China-North Korea ties in a shifting regional landscape. Manu Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Well, this trip comes at a time of shifting regional dynamics, with North Korea deepening ties with Russia, tensions rising between China and the United States, and growing questions about security in Northeast Asia. While both sides are highlighting their traditional friendship, analysts will be looking for clues about the future of the relationship, North Korea's nuclear ambitions too, and also China's broader strategic calculations. Well, joining us to discuss all of that is Jorge Costa Oliveira, political analyst. He's joining us from Lisbon in Portugal. Mr. Oliveira, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Why has Xi Jinping chosen North Korea as one of his first major diplomatic priorities this year, do you think?
Well, it's a very good question. Not sure if anyone really has an absolute correct answer. From what has surfaced and from the reading of the geopolitical situation, I'd say that there are a number of factors. From North Korea, first, we should not forget that China has more than 100 partnerships with more than 100 countries, but only has one defense alliance with North Korea. But that has never meant that China wanted to have a very close connection with North Korea, namely enabling its nuclear program. That nuclear program has speed up in the last years, thanks to the effort of the North Korean government, but especially due to assistance that one thinks that came from Russia, especially as concerns the capability to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles. Those intercontinental ballistic missiles put a lot of people nervous, especially in the US. But I think China is not immune also to that effect. From the point of view of the West and many other parts of the world, North Korea is to some extent the responsibility of China to have it contained beyond a certain point. The second factor, I think, that is quite relevant here is the economic situation of North Korea, which is not brilliant. North Korea is in dire need of foreign investment, and I would not be surprised if in the coming weeks we would find out that new approaches to and new avenues of cooperation for Chinese investment in North Korea appear. But I think that China is not really nervous about Japan's approach in the region, but more to the Russia growing influence in North Korea. And I think a lot of this trip and a lot of the coming developments arises from that concern.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, because of course North Korea closer to Russia than I guess at any point in decades now. Do you think then we're going to see increased almost competition between Moscow and Beijing to try and sort of reassert their influence over North Korea?
Now, in the nuclear area, I have absolutely no doubt that is going to be the case. In terms of defense assistance and defense cooperation also. In the economic field, I don't think there will be. I would not put my chips on the fact that Russia wants to invest significantly on North Korea. I don't think that's going to happen. But I don't think China will want to do it alone. So it probably will want North Korea to give in to prepare some kind of commitment so that Chinese foreign investment comes along with Western foreign investment.
China is notoriously long-term in its strategic thinking. I mean, what do you think Beijing wants from this relationship long-term? Is it sort of looking almost beyond Kim himself, or is this just very much a sort of a medium-term tactical play, do you think?
North Korea doesn't really have a great image inside China. I remember many years ago, when I lived in the Far East, having Chinese friends that say, hey, I don't have a lot of money, but my family is rich compared to North Koreans. We have 3 bicycles. So this gives you an idea about what the Chinese think about the North Korean regime. And as the decades have progressed, and North Korea remains with a miserable GDP and with conditions of life for its citizens. It's clear that China's concern with North Korea has nothing to do with any similarity in terms of the path chosen for its economic development. Unlike, for instance, with Vietnam, which clearly copied China's model and integrated with the Chinese economy significantly. So what I think China wants from North Korea is first that it is not an issue of trouble for its own strategy in terms of foreign relations. And secondly, that it is not at a time where China is viewed as one of the main, if not the main, stabilizing factor in a multilateral international legal system, that North Korea does not do anything that jeopardizes the image that China is creating, which is granting it considerable soft power in international terms.
And what do you think North Korea is looking for out of this relationship? I mean, is it sort of, is it interested in soft power beyond, China and Russia, or is it primarily economic assistance?
Well, definitely not soft power. I'd say more hard power. I think North Korea aspires to have cooperation from Russia and from China in its defense capabilities. The Chinese have always been very careful in what kind of equipment and weaponry they allow North Korea to have. And yes, they desperately need Chinese investment in North Korea because the situation currently is not good.
And finally, George, if you look at those actors that might be a bit concerned by this, the United States, South Korea, Japan, we've already mentioned, what indicators do you think those actors are going to be looking for over the coming days?
I think everybody in the West and in the West-friendly countries, and also in other parts of the world, is going to look into how China can contain the way in which North Korea manages its nuclear weaponry, which for now it is at least 50 nuclear warheads.
Thank you, George. Great to get your analysis. As always, we appreciate it very much indeed. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now. After the break, we'll take a look at the results of the elections in Armenia and what they can mean for the future of the region. Don't go away. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note. To Fierce. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the shade of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul for A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has secured another term in office after his party won parliamentary elections in Armenia. Now, the result is expected to allow him to form a government without a coalition, while key questions remain over peace talks with Azerbaijan and Armenia's relations with Russia and the West. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is set to remain in office after his civil contract party won the country's parliamentary election. Pashinyan called the result a historic victory and said civil contract would form the next government on its own.
On June 7th, 2026, the elections to the National Assembly took place. As a result of the elections, the Civil Contract Party won. And the Civil Contract Party will single-handedly form the government.
The Commission said Civil Contract won 49.81% of the vote. Strong Armenia came second with 23.29%, followed by Armenia Alliance with 9.94%. Prosperous Armenia also entered Parliament with 4%. Turnout stood at around 59%, with nearly 1.5 million people casting ballots out of more than 2.5 million registered voters. Civil Contract's share of the vote is enough to form the next government under Armenia's electoral rules. The party is expected to hold a slim parliamentary majority, allowing it to govern without a coalition. Pashinyan campaigned on moving ahead with peace talks with Azerbaijan, deepening ties with the West and maintaining relations with Russia. The opposition accused him of making concessions to Baku and weakening Armenia's ties with Moscow. Russia increased pressure on Yerevan before the vote, including through trade restrictions and warnings over Armenia's closer ties with Europe. The result gives Pashinyan a renewed mandate to pursue a final peace deal with Azerbaijan. But civil contract does not appear to have secured the two-thirds majority needed for constitutional changes that Azerbaijan says are required before a final agreement can be signed. For the South Caucasus, the result keeps Armenia on a more pro-Western path, while leaving key questions over its relations with Russia and the future of peace talks with Azerbaijan. Okay, let's now take a look at the reactions to Pashinyan's victory. Congratulations poured in from across the region and Europe. The messages highlighted not only support for Pashinyan's leadership, but also growing expectations about Armenia's future ties with the European Union.
Regional leaders were among the first to congratulate Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan as vote counting continued following Sunday's parliamentary elections. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze welcomed the result and said he looks forward to strengthening strategic ties between Georgia and Armenia. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev also congratulated Pashinyan, citing preliminary assessments by international observers that the vote was conducted openly and in accordance with electoral laws. Among European leaders, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the result was also a victory for Armenia's sovereignty and independence. French President Emmanuel Macron said Pashinyan's victory would strengthen momentum toward closer ties with Europe. Moldovan President Maya Sandu and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez were also among the leaders sending congratulatory messages. Senior European Union officials likewise welcomed the result. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU deeply values its partnership with a democratic Armenia that is drawing ever closer to Europe, adding that Armenia can count on the bloc's support. European Council President Antonio Costa and European Parliament President Roberta Metsola also congratulated Pashinyan, underscoring continued European engagement with Armenia following the closely watched vote.
And joining us now from Yerevan is Arsen Karacan, founder at AliQ Media. Arsen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're delighted to have you with us, particularly as you were one of those distinguished individuals who advised Prime Minister Pashinyan in his first 100 days in office. Let's get into the detail of this, because there's quite a lot going on, isn't there? The absolute majority with 64 seats in the National Assembly, remaining short, though, of the constitutional majority needed to initiate a constitutional referendum. The Civil Contract Party secured just under the 50% mark in terms of the popular vote. What does all this mean for the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process?
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for your interest in Armenia's elections. I'll have to make two quick comments before I address your question. First, I saw in your programming that Prosperous Armenia as the number 4 party is shown as part of the parliament. It's not true yet. They have a little bit of a shortage of votes, and they are not in so far. So we only have Civic Contract, Nikol Pashinyan Civil Contract, and 2 other parties that will most probably appear in the parliament. Number 2, even if he doesn't have a constitutional majority, initiating constitutional changes may be done in different other mechanisms, so that's not the big problem. However, you're exactly right that Civil Contract now has a majority in the parliament. It can form a government without a need of a coalition, but it cannot make amendments or changes in the constitution. However, if it comes to Armenia-Azerbaijani discussion, if we're talking about a change of constitution or a new constitution, it would have to go through a referendum anyways. Now, how it will impact the peace process remains to be seen. We haven't heard anything from Baku or from Ankara. Nobody has congratulated Pashinyan. We've also seen the third party former President Robert Kocaman announcing that they will not accept the results of the elections and they might challenge it. However, you also suggested, which are facts, different foreign leaders congratulating already, including that of the Georgian leader who congratulated even before the vote was counted or finished. So it's a bit of a jiggly situation. We will see if these elections will be challenged, if the opposition will accept the results of these elections and choose to go to the parliament, or it will decide to challenge the elections legally, which means that they will most probably take it to the Constitutional Court. However, we haven't heard the exact steps that they're planning to take.
And if it isn't challenged, what's your instinct? I mean, you've got vast experience in this area. What's your instinct about the signing of the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace agreement? Is that under challenge, or do things look pretty positive in that direction?
I mean, I don't see any challenge for the Armenian-Azerbaijani peace agreement signing. It's been pre-signed, as you know, on August 8th last year. We've heard many times from Azerbaijani colleagues that they are waiting or expecting until the elections, the results of the elections in Armenia are clear, and then they'll move forward. These are in our internal talks. So I don't see a reason why not. Pashinyan won. He has a majority. He will represent Armenia, and the government will be formed by him and his party, and he will not need coalition allies. So he has all the legal rights to sign the agreement. It is up to Azerbaijan to say when they're ready to move forward.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but for any constitutional referendum, it's not sufficient just for the 50% plus one of those voting to support the proposal. There's also a requirement, I believe, that at least 25% of all registered voters participate in and also support the referendum.
You can do a pre-referendum by collecting enough signatures for a topic to become part of the referendum. I'll have to double check that regulation, but there's not one way of conducting a referendum in Armenia. It can come from different parts of the society. The parliament is not the only body, or the ruling party is not the only initiator. So if we're talking about initiating a constitutional referendum or constitutional amendments and or a new constitution, this political party can initiate that, and I'm sure they will be able to deliver at least the discussion to be part of the political landscape. But I'm not even sure that a referendum is part of the discussion or should be part of the discussion with regards to the peace agreement. Mm-hmm. I think these are obstacles that are definitely not needed right now. We have far more reaching goals as parties besides the constitutional change. So we are already talking on various levels bilaterally. We have something that no other, I don't think, neighbors have, which is an intergovernmental commission that works on demarcation and delimitation without having diplomatic relations and or a peace agreement. So we do have already existing institutions and structures that cooperate between the two governments. So I don't see that as an obstacle.
And you quite rightly corrected us on the issue of the Prosperous Armenia party in our package. The votes are being recounted, I believe. If the party does reach the 4% threshold, the 64 seats provisionally allocated to the Civil Contract Party, I guess they could be reduced then to 61, and that would deprive it of the overall majority, the 63 seats that are required. Do you think, well, firstly, is that the case? Secondly, if so, how important is that?
Legally, because electoral democracy is a key interest of mine, and I am eager making sure that we actually do this by the book. We have so far only seen members of the Prosperous Armenia giving a press conference and suggesting that in a couple of particular precincts, there have been miscounts. So they might actually go for a recount. I don't know. We will see, but they have started a legal process with the Central Electoral Commission. In the meantime, the redistribution of the vote that the parties by Armenian electoral law and constitution If you're a political party, the benchmark is 4%. For blocks, it's 8%. So the parties that didn't reach 4%, there were 18 parties in the elections. Some of them actually gathered as much as 2% of a vote, 1%, and that's a lot of people if you think about it. So those votes are going to be redistributed among those who have majority now in the parliament. It's a bit of a complex system, and so we will see after the final redistribution, if there are three parties, we know the situation will be 65 mandates in a 105 parliament to the ruling party, 28 to the second largest opposition party, and around 12 or 15, if I'm not mistaken, to the last. Yes, you're right. If the fourth party comes in, single public contract, like the other two parties, will have 2 or more mandates less.
A complex system, but we're very grateful to you, Mr. Karacian, for taking us through that and explaining it to us. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis.
Thank you for your interest.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Now, Uzbekistan and Russia have discussed expanding cooperation in agriculture, food security and energy during a series of meetings held on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova brings more from Tashkent.
Agriculture and energy were among the key topics discussed by Uzbek and Russian officials at the St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum. Deputy Prime Minister Jamshid Hojayev met with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Patrushev to discuss the further development of cooperation in agriculture and food security. Russia remains one of Uzbekistan's key partners in the sector, with bilateral trade in agricultural and food products reaching $2.3 billion in 2025. In the first quarter of this year alone, trade exceeded $500 million. Particular attention was paid to stable agricultural supplies, veterinary and phytosanitary cooperation, and maintaining favorable conditions for the import of socially important goods and raw materials. The sides agreed to introduce a new quarantine control mechanism, strengthen monitoring of orchards and farmland, and conduct regular inspections to ensure uninterrupted trade. Energy cooperation also featured prominently on the agenda. During talks with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, the parties reviewed supplies of crude oil and petroleum products, including petrol, aviation fuel and feedstock for oil refineries, as well as broader issues of energy security.
The meeting came shortly after Presidents Shavkat Mirziyoyev and Vladimir Putin officially launched construction of the first power unit of Uzbekistan's integrated nuclear power plant in Jizakh region. The project, valued at $9.5 billion, will include 4 power units and is scheduled to be commissioned between 2029 and 2035. Russia will support the project through a preferential export loan, while Rosatom will supply nuclear fuel and provide technical support. In addition, meetings were held with the leadership of Gazprom, Rosneft and Gazprom Oil to discuss gas supplies, energy security and prospects for future joint projects. It is Yulia Jabov reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
The UK Prime Minister has stepped up pressure on major tech firms over online child safety. Well, he's warning companies they must act quickly or face new legislation. Our correspondent reports now from Manchester.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has given tech giants Apple and Google a 3-month deadline to introduce software that blocks explicit images on children's phones or face new laws forcing them to do so. Speaking at London Tech Week, Starmer said companies must activate nudity detection systems or similar tools across smartphones and tablets to prevent minors from creating, sending or receiving sexually explicit images unless verified as adults. He warned that if firms fail to comply by September, the government will bring forward legislation to make these protections mandatory on all devices sold in the UK. The Prime Minister said too many have accepted their idea that nothing can be done to stop children sharing explicit content, calling that view unacceptable. He insists that technology must adapt to society, not the other way around, and said online predators must be stopped from exploiting young people through their devices. The move follows growing political pressure over child safety online, including the resignation of former Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips, who accused the government of delaying stronger action to prevent children creating and sharing explicit images of themselves. The government says it wants the UK to become the first country to effectively block children from taking, sending or viewing nude images on phones. The companies have already introduced limited tools, such as a warning system for sensitive content, but ministers argue these are not strong enough because they can often be bypassed. Zaina Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
A major water infrastructure project is set to launch in southern Kyrgyzstan, where access to clean drinking water remains a challenge for many rural communities. Well, authorities say the initiative could improve living conditions for thousands of people in the Osh region. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamazina reports.
Nearly 158,000 people in southern Kyrgyzstan could soon gain access to clean drinking water after authorities reached an agreement on financing for a major infrastructure project in the Osh region, following talks with the Eurasian Fund for Stabilization and Development. The project will cover 32 villages in the Karasu and Uzgen districts, where many residents still rely on unsafe water sources or aging water systems built from the 1950s through to the 1980s. The problem is especially acute in the Osh region, one of the most densely populated areas of Kyrgyzstan. Access to safe drinking water here is estimated at around 65%, leaving many rural communities without reliable supply. Under the agreement, the Eurasian Fund for Stabilization and Development will provide a $60 million loan. The total cost of the project is estimated at $66.7 million, with the Kyrgyz side contributing $6.7 million through co-financing. The deal is expected to be signed by the end of June 2026, with the implementation planned over the next 5 years. And according to official figures, Kyrgyzstan has more than 2,000 villages, and 405 of them still lack access to drinking water. The country's Ministry of Water Resources says most of these villages are located in the south, particularly in the Osh, Jalalabad and Batken regions. Fariza Kalimurzana, Almaty, A News.
Well, with the exchange of fire resuming between Israel and Iran, reports say there have been explosions in Tehran and missile interceptions across Israel, with Yemen's Houthi movement also joining the fighting. Well, Iran says its latest barrage was in response to Israeli strikes on Beirut yesterday. Let's find out more now from Blake Sifton in Tel Aviv.
2 months to the day since Iran and the United States agreed on a ceasefire to end their conflict, we are now back on the cusp of full-scale war. This began yesterday in Lebanon when Hezbollah fired 2 rockets at northern Israel, which is a red line for Israel. Israel then carried out airstrikes in Beirut, which is a red line for Iran. And in response, Iran has launched 11 ballistic missiles at northern Israel last night around 10 p.m. Overnight, the Israeli Air Force then responded by striking targets in western and central Iran. It's understood they targeted radar stations, missile launch sites, as well as a drone factory. And in this morning, we had further salvos, 2 from Iran and 1 from the Houthi militia in Yemen. It's understood at least 30 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel. The Home Front Command here in Israel has closed schools across the country for the entire day today, and they have ordered hospitals to carry out their operations underground in fortified shelters. Now, after this initial Iranian attack last night, it's understood that President Trump had a phone conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he urged the Israeli Prime Minister not to respond because President Trump believes that a deal with Iran is close. According to those reports, Prime Minister Netanyahu pushed back and he pseudo-agreed in the sense that he agreed not to carry out escalatory or controversial attacks, but that he would respond in some way. So in attacking military sites, it's believed that Israel is trying to calibrate their fire and is trying to prevent an escalation. Israel's ambassador to the UN said, importantly, that Israel is not targeting Iranian energy infrastructure. Of course, that would be viewed as an escalation. However, this morning, the Israeli military did confirm that they have struck multiple parts of an Iranian petrochemical factory. Now, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard say that they targeted 2 Israeli air bases in the south of Israel in the Negev desert. Those bases have been targeted before. They are remote bases, and it's a less controversial target than, say, striking or attempting to strike the headquarters of the Israeli military here in downtown Tel Aviv. So it's unclear if both sides are trying to calibrate their fire, are trying to prevent this from escalating potentially out of control. The involvement of the Houthi militia is an important development because they have largely sat out of the last war with Iran. But of course, they control the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and they can block maritime traffic through that crucial strait to the Red Sea and through the Suez Canal, of course, at a time when the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. So we now wait and see whether this situation will escalate further, whether there will be more back and forth strikes, more missiles fired at Israel, and more Israeli airstrikes carried out in Iran. We've heard both from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who say that they are ready for widespread operations, and we've heard from the Israeli military, who say that they are ready for both attack and defense. Blake Sifton for A News in Tel Aviv.
The foreign ministers of Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia have held trilateral talks in Istanbul, reaffirming their commitment to regional cooperation and signing a joint document known as the Istanbul Declaration. Well, the meeting comes at a time of heightened geopolitical uncertainty in the South Caucasus, along with mounting interest in regional transport and energy corridors. Adam Morrow brings details now.
Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia have reaffirmed their strategic partnership following a trilateral meeting on Monday between their respective foreign ministers in Istanbul. At the meeting, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan hosted his Azerbaijani and Georgian counterparts Ceyhun Bayramov and Maka Bachvarishvili. It was the 10th such meeting in the trilateral format, which was first launched in 2012 with the aim of enhancing political, economic and security cooperation between the 3 countries. Following the talks, the 3 ministers signed the Istanbul Declaration, a joint statement outlining their shared priorities and vision for regional cooperation. According to the declaration, the 3 countries reaffirmed their commitment to each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and internationally recognized borders. The document also stresses the importance of peace, stability, and prosperity in the South Caucasus and highlights the role of trilateral cooperation in addressing common regional and global challenges. During the talks, the ministers discussed regional security, economic integration, energy cooperation, and transportation links. According to diplomatic sources, the closed-door talks reportedly laid particular emphasis on key east-west connectivity projects involving all three countries. The trilateral framework has become increasingly important as the emerging Middle Corridor comes into focus as an alternative trade route linking Europe with Central Asia and China. The three countries are already linked via several strategic projects, including the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway, the Southern Gas Corridor, and a range of energy and transport infrastructure networks. Monday's meeting in Istanbul comes amid significant geopolitical change in South Caucasus, where regional governments hope to capitalize on growing demand for alternative energy routes and secure transport corridors. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Georgians may lose their visa-free access to Europe. Brussels has activated a formal suspension mechanism against Georgia and called Georgian officials to a dialogue meeting on June the 11th. Our very own Nini Nikolashvili has more now from Tbilisi.
Millions of Georgian citizens could lose the right to travel to Europe without a visa, and the clock is ticking. The meeting on June 11 is taking place under the suspension mechanism Brussels activated against Georgia in March, a decision that already stripped holders of Georgian diplomatic service and official passports of their travel rights until March 2027. The Commission also introduced enhanced screening of all Georgian citizens at EU borders, with checks running across European databases, including the Visa Information System, the Schengen Information System, and the Entry-Exit System, rolled out across the EU last October. The latest EU report under the mechanism makes clear why Brussels is alarmed. Georgia has fulfilled almost none of its recommendations. The Commission points to Tbilisi granting visa-free access to Chinese citizens in 2024, maintaining arrangements with 26 countries whose nationals need visas to enter the EU, and allowing entry to citizens of 17 others solely on the basis of Gulf Cooperation Council permits. Brussels called this backsliding systematic and deliberate. The Georgian government sees this differently. Parliament Speaker Shalva Paplashvili described the June 11 meeting as technical rather than political and accused Brussels of imposing conditions that go beyond visa liberalization criteria and infringe on Georgian sovereignty. He pushed back against EU expectations that Georgia join sanctions against Russia and scrap its foreign agents law. But Georgian opposition parties and civil society organizations strongly reject that framing, holding the government itself responsible for the country's deteriorating relationship with the European Union. The road ahead has clear milestones. In December, the Commission publishes its next annual report, and in January 2027, EU member states may vote on whether to maintain or fully suspend visa-free travel for all Georgian citizens, a right that Georgians have held since 2017. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan has raised concern over reports that several women have been arrested in Herat for allegedly failing to follow hijab and dress regulations. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
UNAMA has expressed concern over what it describes as multiple arrests and detentions of women in Herat in western Afghanistan. According to the UN's mission, the women were reportedly detained for alleged non-compliance with dress requirements, including hijab regulations. In its statement, UNAMA said these reports raise serious human rights concerns. The mission also reminded the de facto authorities that all people have the right to freedom of movement. It added that women and men are equally entitled to equality before the law. So far, Afghan authorities have not issued any comment on the reported arrests in Herat or on UNAMA's statement. The issue of women's rights and restrictions on women's public life has remained a major concern in Afghanistan, with international organizations repeatedly calling for the protection of basic freedoms. For now, UNAMA says it is concerned about the reported detentions and is urging respect for fundamental rights, including freedom of movement and equal treatment under the law. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
In an historic first, Pope Leo has delivered a sweeping political address to Spain's parliament, warning that rising global conflicts and polarization have pushed the world into a profound crisis. Well, the pontiff fiercely opposed rising European military spending and urged leaders to prioritize diplomacy. Turning to global migration, he framed the crisis not just as a political challenge, but as a direct test on human morality.
The tragic drama of migration challenges the conscience of nations and the ethical foundation of the international order. Numerous men, women and children are forced, often by dramatic circumstances, to leave their communities and abandon loved ones, histories and bonds. The situation of migrants and refugees demands a response that looks at the people, addresses the causes that force them to leave, and goes beyond the mere management of flows. From this arises a dual requirement of social justice: to provide safe and legal pathways, respectful reception and real possibilities for integration, and at the same time to promote the right to remain in one's own land.
The leaders of Britain, France and Germany have backed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's proposal for direct talks with Russia's President Vladimir Putin during a meeting in London. The diplomatic push comes as Kyiv and Moscow continue to exchange long-range strikes.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and French President Emmanuel Macron in London on Sunday to discuss support for Ukraine and possible steps towards ending the war. European leaders and Ukraine have agreed on 5 key conditions for what they describe as a just and lasting peace deal to end the war with Russia. They backed a proposal for direct talks between Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin, with European and US participation, and called for an immediate ceasefire as the basis for negotiations. The leaders also discussed Ukraine's military needs, including additional air defense missiles, following some of the largest Russian air raids on Ukrainian cities in recent weeks. The talks followed Zelensky's recent proposal for a direct meeting with Putin, which the Russian president rejected, saying conditions were not yet in place for meaningful negotiations. Meanwhile, attacks were reported on both sides overnight. Russian drone attacks struck Kharkiv, with local authorities reporting multiple impacts as damage assessments continued. On the Russian side, Moscow-appointed authorities in occupied Crimea said a Ukrainian drone struck a passenger train early on Monday, killing an assistant driver and injuring the driver. Air raid alerts were also issued in the Russian Black Sea port of Novorossiysk.
Nigeria's security forces have rescued 360 men, women and children from a mountain hideout in the northeastern state of Borno. Now, the group included men, women and children abducted from several communities. The military said they were being held by JAS, the main faction of Boko Haram, in the Mandara Mountains. Officials said the rescue followed an intelligence-led operation by a joint task force, including special forces. 2 children died in captivity from exhaustion and harsh conditions. Well, as David Barnea's term as Mossad chief comes to an end, new reports in the Israeli media are shedding light on major reforms inside Israel's intelligence agency and its campaign against Iran and Hezbollah. The report describes a sweeping overhaul of Mossad's technology, operations and recruitment methods, offering a rare look at how Israel says it adapted to a changing battlefield.
Israeli media reports are providing new details about how Mossad transformed under outgoing director David Barnea. The reports, based on interviews with senior Israeli military and intelligence officials, describe what insiders reportedly called a biometric revolution inside the agency. The reforms focused on 3 key areas: advanced technology, operational capacity, and new ways to prevent undercover agents from being identified. According to the reports, Mossad expanded its use of cyber tools, digital technologies, and artificial intelligence. At the same time, it increased its ability to conduct multiple operations against different targets, both independently and alongside the Israeli military. A major part of the restructuring involved Mossad's human intelligence network. The agency reportedly reorganized its long-standing Tzomet division, creating specialized units focused on agent recruitment, covert operations, and high-risk strategic missions. Israeli reports also claim that Mossad significantly expanded its technological capabilities. Some officials said Mossad had become better than several Western intelligence agencies in some technology and cyber areas. Another reported change was the creation of a dedicated unit focused on infiltration and psychological operations. The unit is said to have played a role in information campaigns targeting senior Iranian figures. The articles also highlight Mossad's increasing reliance on foreign national agents. According to the reports, this approach was used during the 2025 conflict between Israel and Iran. The reports claim that trained Iranian civilians carried out covert actions against Iranian military assets from inside the country. Many of the claims contained in the reports cannot be independently verified. However, they seem to offer one of the most detailed accounts yet of how Israeli intelligence officials view Mossad's evolution under Barnea's leadership.
Gaza's health authorities said on Sunday that 10 people were killed and 36 injured due to Israeli strikes over the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Hamas spokesperson Hazam Qassem said talks are continuing in Cairo with mediators from Egypt, Qatar and Turkey. Now, the meeting aims to fully implement the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement and its humanitarian terms. It also seeks to stop what he called genocide and assassinations against Palestinians. He added that efforts are focused on ensuring fair enforcement of the US-backed Board of Peace. The French National Assembly's Legal Commission has approved a draft bill that would grant the island of Corsica a special autonomous status within the French Republic. Now, the move aims to address decades of cultural and political demands from the island. However, there's already a fierce debate over national unity.
France's Legal Commission has approved a landmark draft bill titled Corsica's Right to Special Autonomy. If passed, the constitutional amendment will grant the island self-governance, officially recognising its unique cultural and linguistic heritage. Under the new framework, the local assembly, the Collectivité de Corse, can adapt national regulations to fit local economic needs. However, all regional laws must strictly align with the French constitution and international law, leaving essential state powers with Paris. The move has sharply divided lawmakers. Right-wing Republicans strongly oppose the bill, arguing it threatens national unity. Meanwhile, left-wing Liberal parties and Corsican representatives support it as a necessary step for self-determination. The full National Assembly is scheduled to vote on the bill on June 24th, which will determine the future of Corsica's administrative status.
The World Health Organization says confirmed Ebola cases have risen to 452 in the Democratic Republic of Congo and 19 in Uganda. The new wave of virus outbreak has claimed 82 lives in the two countries so far. Well, health officials reported 100 new infections and 20 deaths in the past 24 hours in both countries. In response, the World Health Organization and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have launched a continent-wide preparedness and response plan. The initiative aims to strengthen detection, containment and treatment efforts. It also seeks to raise $518 million to support African countries battling the outbreak over the coming months through November. Iran's national football team arrived in Mexico over the weekend ahead of the World Cup matches in the United States. Now, the squad flew in from Turkey and reached the border city of Tirana early in the morning. Iran's Football Federation had to move the team's base from Arizona to Mexico at the last minute due to uncertainty over US visa arrangements. Although the US issued visas to all players, some members of the support staff were not granted entry permits. Iran will play its first match against New Zealand on the 15th of June. Over to the world of tech now, and Google has released an experiment AI app that can make illustrations of your life. The EU is moving away from US-based search sites, and Microsoft is diving deeper into artificial intelligence. Here's more with A News's Nathan Kananga.
Have you ever wondered what your life would look like as a story? Well, you're in luck, my friend, because Google has just released an app that's capable of turning your life into an illustration. It's called Dream Beans, and the app collects data from across the Google services you use. And yes, that includes photos and search history. And then the app generates a list of AI illustrated stories. The stories could be suggestions based on what the app has picked up from your calendar, or could be ads based on your search history. Google says that only the user can view the app's stories and can control what services it collects data from. So give Dream Beans a try, though it's worth noting that it's currently only available for eligible US-based Google AI Ultra subscribers. If that's you, I just hope your stories aren't a horror show. Now, big news from the European Union that has announced that its parliament will make a switch to the French search engine Qwant from Google. The move comes as the bloc pushes to reduce its reliance on US technology. So I decided to give Qwant a try, just to see how good it is compared to Google. I gave both search engines the task of finding restaurants around me. Google's results showcased specific places and even included a rating and a price range. Qwant, on the other hand, came back with links to websites, of which the first 4 were ads. So maybe Qwant just can't compete yet. But to be fair, I'm pretty sure the European Parliament has more important things to search for than restaurants. Now, Microsoft has unveiled a new platform that it says will deliver an AI agent-first experience. It's called Project Solara, and the platform is built on the idea that the next era of computing will shift from apps to AI agents. Now, I know that sounds a little confusing, so here's what's really going on. Right now, you use different apps for different tasks, often switching between them to get a single job done. Microsoft says AI agents could simplify that process by carrying out tasks across multiple services based on a single command. To demonstrate the idea, the company showcased a wearable badge concept that can run an AI agent. Microsoft says it could help workers in fields such as healthcare by assisting with tasks like patient check-ins, documentation, and verification. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to catch up with us for more tech news and insights on the next show.
Fascinating stuff there from Nathan and the Switch team. Well, that does bring us to the end of Primetime for tonight. Please do join us again tomorrow though for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.